Until 1962, randomized clinical trials were not done by much of anybody. We had a randomized clinical trial in 47 to evaluate streptomycin to treat tuberculosis. We didn't have another randomized clinical trial that measured up to contemporary standards until around 1960. Why did clinical trials suddenly pop up? Well, it had to do with the fact that in 1962, Congress passed the Harris-Kefauver amendments to the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. Until 62, all the drug company had to do in order to get its drug in the marketplace was to show it was safe. The 62 amendment said you have to show it's effective. How were you supposed to show that it was effective? It said you had to have substantial evidence based upon adequate and controlled clinical trials. Wow, what a bonanza for the statisticians. If you look at the legislative history, they were not talking about randomized clinical trials. In the 1950s, clinical trials where the drug company would give doctors in practice samples. Try these out on your patients and let us know how it works. Are you happy with this? Was not data. But that was what they would use to support their claims that, look, this drug is good. 1,000 doctors said it was. But when they wrote the legislation calling for adequate and well-controlled trials, enter the statisticians. And we developed an industry. Randomized clinical trials became very formal and, incidentally, very satisfactory devices to figure out whether or not a drug was, particularly whether it was effective. And as you went along, you also accumulated less well-controlled data to show whether or not it had serious adverse effects. Now, in the beginning, I see Joan's with us. She quotes the Bible, I'll quote the Bible. In the beginning, the drug company was always responsible for presenting to FDA the grounds to support its petition that they be licensed to distribute a drug commercially in the United States. And it never was the business of academia to establish efficacy, safety, or anything else about drugs. If somebody in academia got interested in a drug because it had a particularly interesting effect or mechanism of action, they would do research on it. They might even ask for a federal grant. But the federal grant never said, I want to see if this drug is safe and effective. The federal grant would say, I want to see what the effect is of digitalis on the electrophysiology of the heart, and whether or not that's connected with anything good might come of that in the management of arrhythmias. It was a very different exercise. I will tell you how the National Commission thought about it. They said, in this large collection of activities that we are calling research, some of it is non-developmental research, basic research. How does the pancreas work? Not how can you fix it or make it work better. Beneficence, a single principle named beneficence, was applied to that because the benefit was knowledge that would be useful. In the 60s, one of the first sentences you would see in a basic science journal was, we decided to do this study because this was unknown. It didn't say because if we knew it, we could improve the human condition. The thing that was intolerable to a good basic scientist was that there was something we could know that we don't know. And they would write a grant. I want to study this because no one knows the answer. They also recognized that some of the research that was being done in 1975 was developmental. They want to develop a better treatment for cancer, for diabetes, for whatever. Beneficence then had two prongs. Benefit for the individual research subject, if you're lucky, or if you're not lucky, knowledge that will be useful in benefiting future subjects or individuals who have the same problems that the current subjects have. It was never put in terms of the medical requirement to benefit individual patients. That was never the primary goal of research. If you did something that would benefit individual patients, that could have some effect on justifying doing research on what were then called the special populations. And if you look at the regulations for research involving children, there are certain thresholds. If what you're doing is minimal risk, generalized beneficence is good enough. If you have a minor increase above minimal risk, the goal of the research would be to develop knowledge that was of vital importance, right? To ameliorating the condition that these children have. That put pediatric researchers in a big bind, because if they ever wanted to develop normal control information, the subjects would be normal children, and nothing was of vital importance to ameliorating their condition. To this day, we're debating what is a condition. There's been some creative responses to that. So, yes, Alex, the scene has changed. But even in the 1960s, before there was a national commission, those of us who were working, I was a clinical pharmacologist, I was interested in developing drugs. We would criticize the drug companies for what we called the horsepower effect, right? Drug company A has a drug. I mean, one of the classics was one of the phenothiazine tranquilizers. And drug company B says, we have another phenothiazine tranquilizer, and instead of giving 25 milligrams, you only have to give 5 milligrams. More powerful, that's better. But in every other respect, the results seem precisely the same. And our gallows humor was calling this the horsepower effect. Same in the field of diuretics. This has become magnified. There is entirely too much energy on the part of the pharmaceutical industry trying to corner a piece of the market, a market that is already quite well satisfied by what's out there. This is something that the National Commission was aware of, but did not concentrate on. It thought, well, you know, it's kind of the analogy of, well, boys will be boys, you know. Some of these people are going to do things that do not bring all that much benefit to that many people. But there we also had the policies of the FDA, which was not permitted to take into account whether a drug that was whether an application for a marketing permit represented something that was superior to or equal to what was already in the marketplace. They were limited in their considerations to evaluating this drug.
Safe and effective.
Right.
That's it.
Not whether it was more safe or more effective.
Right.
Now they can make comparative judgments.